Welcome back to another episode of the Two Christian Dudes podcast, where my friend Randy K and I have conversations with amazing people. As you've already figured out, if you've listened to or watched the earlier episodes in the season, for season one, we are talking about near death experiences. And today we have an amazing guest. His name is Captain Dale Black. I know you're going to be touched by his story. Some of you I know are going to be challenged by his story. But I know that as you listen, as you watch, you're going to learn more about Jesus. You're going to learn more about heaven. And my prayer for this conversation is that you're going to be encouraged. And who knows, maybe somebody in this conversation, you're going to meet Jesus for the first time today. I'm always excited to see what God plans to do through these conversations. Let me bring these fine gentlemen into the conversation. Randy, it's always good to see you, my friend. And Captain Dale, I've been looking forward to talking to you for some time. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. A pleasure to be with both of you.
And
Great to
Randy,
have
take
you.
it away, my friend.
We call you Captain Dale Black because for 40 years, I believe, you were an airline pilot and you flew many missionary flights, and you were also a flight instructor. And so I don't want to lead too much into your story, but you're doing ministry now with Dale Black Ministries, and I have been an observer and a participant within that ministry as well. Uh, Dale, you have impressed me in terms of your story because of your love for the Lord, and I know that evokes a certain degree of emotion. So, um, if you can just walk us through what happened to you on that fateful day, and how you were ushered into heaven, your book, Flight to Heaven, that would be greatly appreciated. We look forward to hearing.
Now, I did spend 50 years as a pilot, much of that as an airline pilot, and with an airline, a couple of different airlines, but I trained pilots from just about every U.S. airline that there is. And I ended up, my retirement was as a FAA flight examiner in the Boeing 737. Although I had flown 727, 707s in the early days, went up to the 747 and mostly Boeing equipment. In addition, I owned my wife and I, we founded and owned a jet charter company. And most of our clients were Hollywood executives, Fortune 500 people. And then that kind of led to when the body of Christ started bringing airplanes, jet aircraft into their ministries. We did some selling of airplanes to ministries, and we trained their pilots. And in many cases, we provided, free services to a lot of ministries for a lot of years. But yeah, I always dreamed of someday retiring and becoming an author, just writing books and sharing the stories, the thousands of hands-on experiences that I believe God put into my heart and in my life. The trying to just not be a preacher. I wasn't a preacher. I wasn't a pastor. I wasn't a paid clergy at all. I was a pilot. I owned a business, and we sold jet airplanes as a hobby. And it became a wonderful thing to do. And God just led one step at a time. But it began really when I was 19. I was a passenger. I was a volunteer co-pilot, but I ended up being a passenger on a twin engine airplane, a propeller driven airplane, an aircraft called the Piper Navajo, a 10-passenger airplane. We were carrying cargo out of the Burbank airport, flying to multiple places around California. And this had been probably my 50th or 60th flight. I was pretty comfortable. Even though I was only 19, I had about 100 hours in this aircraft, and I ended up becoming a volunteer co-pilot. We arrived that morning. 3 pilots were there. Gene was in the left seat. I was sitting co-pilot, expecting to serve as a first officer as usual. Pilot in command, Chuck, was in the temporary third seat behind us. And we taxied out for takeoff. The weather was perfect. No rain, no clouds, great visibility. It's going to be another great July day. And this was July 18th, 1969. We had already taken off. The story was that Apollo 11 was en route to the moon. And this is right in between their space flight between Earth and the moon. So we took off, and just before takeoff that day, I got tapped on the shoulder by the boss, Chuck, who was my flight instructor, and he was like my older brother in a lot of ways. And he told me to flip-flop seats. So I got out of the seat in the co-pilot. He got in and he strapped himself in. We started rolling down the runway. We were building up speed, 60 knots, 80 knots, 100 knots. We usually rotated the aircraft, which means you bring the nose of the airplane up. That's called rotation. And we usually rotated about, 100 knots. And for some reason that day, I remember that Gene rotated a little early, surprised me. But the airplane went up, it started climbing up. The gear was selected up, the power was normal, at max thrust we had, and the airplane started climbing normally. Everything seemed pretty normal until we got to about 100 feet AGL. We were just above the ground, AGL above the ground. And I noticed then this strange sound, a horrendous whine and synchronization between the two engines. And something was horribly wrong. That was clear within about a second. And I started scanning the dials to see what could possibly be wrong. And I was looking, and about that time, Chuck yelled in the cockpit. That's never done, by the way. He barked and yelled and said, "Let's land in that clear area over there." And he pointed with his left hand. And I looked up, I leaned up in that chair, and I looked up and I saw what looked like a park, a bunch of green grass. And I thought, oh my gosh, we're going to be the headlines of tomorrow's newspaper. Strange, but that was my last thought. I watched Chuck grab the flight controls with both hands and turn them all the way left, all the way back against his chest. And that was my last memory. And the rest of it takes place, I find out later, but we had slammed into the book Visiting Heaven says it's 70 foot tall, but on the 50th anniversary, we had a ceremony there, and the people that designed the curator and the building, and they indicate it's 120 feet tall. That's quite a difference, and it's easy to understand why it's hard to. It's so surrounded with everything, but it doesn't matter how tall it is. It was a big building, and it's very solid. And we impacted that at about the 75-foot mark at 135 miles an hour. And with that impact, the airplane just broke into a couple thousand pieces, and there was no cockpit to be in anymore. It's not like a big jet. This is a small airplane, maybe as big as your living room, but still, that's not that big. And the three pilots, all three of us, slammed into this immovable object, kind of like two cars going head on the freeway, that kind of impact. And it was lethal. It actually caused fatalities, of course, that impact, that blunt trauma. And then the three pilots fell, all three of us, just right next to each other on the ground. And the strangest part is right now, this is where I can tell you that I was looking down, confused, looking down at three pilots, not knowing that I was in that airplane, really not knowing anything was wrong. But I'm, in a sense, scratching my mind, my head, in a sense. And I'm looking down and I look at the first pilot in uniform and I go, man, he is dead, no doubt. But I didn't recognize right away who that was. And then I look at the second pilot and oh my gosh, that's Chuck Burns. He's my flight instructor. He's my good friend. And he looked dead. And then the third body was me. And I looked down and I'm trying to say this quickly, but I had no pain. I had really no worry, but I was completely confused as to why I'm looking down at three pilots. One of those people is me, and it hit me. All of a sudden, it hit me. Not about the cause of the crash, but what hit me was that I realized, oh my gosh, that's not me. I'm up here. That's not me. That's my body. I'm Dale Black. Not that my name means anything. It doesn't. That's just who I am. That's my name. And I'm Dale Black, and I'm up here. I am a spirit, and I have a soul, and I used to live in that body, but I'm not that body. And all of a sudden, I realized in my youthful 19 years, I had always thought that I was my body. Maybe no one else has, but I sure have. I thought that was me, and that maybe I have a spirit. I don't know what that means. And I have a soul. I don't know what that means. And I guess the soul lives forever, but I didn't really, at age 19, I had never understood this. And right then, above my body, I realized I'm a spirit. I have a soul, my mind, my will, my emotions, my spirit, and my soul, they live forever. And that's who I am. And my body is nothing more than the tent, the thing that houses my spirit and my soul, but that's not really me. And I understood the eternal perspective. And I got that before anything else. The next thing that happened was there was ambulance showed up, and there were three. There's a good picture of this too. It's in the book of Visiting Heaven, but that book shows a picture of three Lockheed aircraft employees that had run over, and these are engineers, so they know aviation and they know a little bit about fuel and combustion. And we had fuel drenched over everything. And in fact, for months later, my body, the skin on my body would peel off really thick because I was drenched in that same toxic fuel. But we had no fire, which is a miracle. I don't need to probably go into that, but it's a big thing to me that there was no fire, and there's two very hot engines that were sitting there amongst that fuel, and there was no fire. Guys, you might want to know this. I was an NTSB volunteer. I was a FAA accident prevention counselor. I spent 50 years in aviation. That was my entire life. And I did over 100 accident investigations with big jets and small corporate jets and corporate recip as well. And most every accident included fire. It's just so common to have fuel and heat and plenty of oxygen. And there was no reason logically in the world that our Navajo didn't explode, if not at the top of the monument, certainly down at the bottom of the monument. And there was no fire. I can only tribute God as a miracle working God. But anyway, the ambulance shows up. There was life left in me, thank God for this third paramedic who resuscitated me on the scene. And I was put in an ambulance with Chuck. Back in those days, that was common. We were thrown in the same ambulance, two paramedics working on us. And strangely, my body was in there and I was looking through the window the whole time, chasing. I called it an ambulance chase. It makes no sense. You know, I love things that make sense. I love logic. I like business. I like math, to a point. I like things that are quantifiable and that you can prove. And anything that you can't prove, I don't like. I'm not really uh, the kind of person that talks like this, and yet here I am. God gave me this experience, and I guess it's like you, Randy. You have a similar kind of background in a lot of ways, I've learned. And here we are talking about what happened to us, and it's real, and it happened, and I can't explain very well how or why it happened. All I know is that my entire life changed at that moment. When I woke up from the hospital,